No buds. A Jaspy's Book Club. On the recommendation of a coworker and one time one time B, um, I got this little book, Curl by Bobe, which is kind of how I heard his name pronounced on a Romanian rock station interview. So that's what I'm going with. It's a cool little thing. It's about Mr. Giga, who's the greatest barber in the world. It's a sort of collection of like prose poems slash like 1 to 2 to maybe 4 page stories. It's pages of this size, and they're all basically about Mr. Giga. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly at all, but there's other like recurring characters like Doral, what's his name? Doral Vasilescu. There's like the love objects of Mr. Geeka's poetry. Um, there's a handful of other recurring people. What are the tenors and the soccer players that Geeka cuts, whose hair Geeka cuts, and the wives of the tenors and the soccer players who Mr. Geeka holds a like a speakeasy haircut bar for, and seems to have like nightly orgies because Mr. Geeka never sleeps because he's the world's greatest barber and he cuts 6 people's hair all at once, dancing from chair to chair, and it's a bit of like a bit of playful. When I was reading through it, I was thinking it was like a little bit of playful sort of, I think it was initially published in like the late '80s. I want to say. Nope, 2015. Well, um, it's bits of. As I read it initially, I was thinking it was as sort of bits of surrealism, a sort of like very much in the orbit of like the Louis Aragon book I read late last year, or um, anything, any number of Breton, or even what's his name, Burroughs sort of style of like small thing, like a thought that sort of develops into another thought that just dead ends when another thought happens. That sort of vibe. In the translators afterward, actually, the translator brings up that the sort of like head of the school that Bobe was like sort of part of identified their style, the style of this group of writers, and I think especially Teo Bobe specifically as kitsch. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, it is extremely angled toward kitsch, in a way that like it felt positive to me, because again, it's a bunch of silly shit, right? Like, uh, the world's greatest barber, is a phrase that comes up repeatedly and is a self-evidently goofy sort of appellation, and it is taken to like absurd heights. There's a moment when it's like once a year, like MLK and uh, fucking 2 other people, like world historical figures, like once a year they come to Mr. Geeka's barber shop, all dead of course, come to Mr. Geeka's barber shop to like ceremonially place like snipping scissors in his pocket to like recognize his greatness, stuff like that. And that really like unlocked the book for me and made me think quite highly of it. Honestly, I was having a good time with it, but I couldn't quite put my finger on like tradition or style in a way that like leapt out at me. And sometimes it's nice to have a translators afterward to give you a little context. Sometimes the historical is important in the discussion of a text. Occasionally. I don't really have much more to say other than that, but like I had a good time with this little book, Curl by Teo Bobe. Um, I just thought of this. There was a book I listened to, an audiobook I listened to that I think, to the best of my knowledge, didn't come out here. And I don't know the author's name, but the book was called Kill Them All. like Kill space The space Mall, which is a book I didn't like very much, but that like has kind of stuck with me in a sort of similar way. Maybe it's just the hair connection because in Kill the Mall, it's like about a guy who gets like a basically a oh, what's it called, like an artist's residency. I can't even say it. It's so far removed from my lived experience. At a mall, and has to like write, monthly report backs, but finds it harder and harder. And like one of the main images in it is like he looks out into the mirror and sees that a hair is growing out of his tongue, and then hair starts becoming a massive issue. Um, I remember thinking the pacing was kind of weird on that one, and not really like falling in love with it, but like sort of a similar kitschy style of like take a take a silly thing and kind of run with it. I guess the difference is Curl works for me because it takes that kitschy moment and just sort of bounces around a bunch of different places with it in like short, really like silly ways, in ways that are like genuinely like, oh, I should think about that a little bit. And then the other thing it does is just like there's a couple of poems in here. There's like a occasionally chapters will be sort of in italics, which is indicating that they are like poems written by Mr. Gika, usually like love poems. I was just like, oh, this is like pretty good like this is just like this is just like well constructed love poetry that like with really interesting diction and like striking images, and like it's been so long since it's been so long since I read any love poetry and was like, oh, this is good. Um, but yeah, Curl by Teo Bobe. Thanks for not watching.